Hello chess friends and welcome to Zad of Chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Decline series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from White's and from Black's perspective, and today we're continuing with our Queen's Gambit Decline series and the so-called Tarrasch Defense. The Tarrasch Defense we have explained so far with some ideas for White and for Black, and also with some beautiful sidelines for both sides, and today we're starting a new variation of the Tarrasch Defense. In my opinion it's sort of a opening that you should try to avoid if you're a beginner, but it's a sharp opening of the Tarrasch Defense, and we are analyzing now the so-called Hennig Schara Gambit. And it's really one of the wildest gambit that you see, because in the beginning you basically don't know why it's Black sort of giving up a pawn. The compensation that Black gets is really unclear in the beginning, but when the game is getting more into the middle game stage, you actually are, I think, getting the grip why Black gave up the pawn in the early stage of the game, because the activity that Black can gain is sometimes really too much to handle for White. And in this video we're analyzing the common mistakes that White can make in the Hennig Schara Gambit, and also Black's traps that Black is always preparing in this sharp opening, and how White can fall very easily into this tactical idea. So as I said, in my opinion it's sort of an opening I'm warning you that you should try to avoid, but I have to also tell you that Magnus Carlsen recently played the one Hennig Schara Gambit in two big events. He played in the Tata Steel Masters, this very nice opening with the black pieces, and also now recently in the Airthing Masters in 2022. So in the later stage of this opening theory I'm going to cover these two games as really a beautiful cornerstone that you can use in order to find good strategical elements of these openings, and we'll analyze also some games played by Stockfish from White's and from Black's perspective. So in my opinion we'll have really fun with the Hennig Schara Gambit. So let's check out now this beautiful opening and how White can fall into many tactical traps. So here we have d4, d5 is of course Black's response, c4 the Queen's Gambit, and now after move e6 we have the Queen's Gambit decline. Now after move knight to c3 we have now the Tarrasch Defense move, which is now the move c5, and many times I recommended you from White's perspective to proceed here with the move c takes d5, which is in my opinion one of the best ways here to proceed, because after e takes d5 we can know this now. After potential d takes c5, Black is always left with an isolated pawn, which can be of course a strategical disadvantage, and then White basically know what White should do. White is playing many times the blockade idea against this isolated pawn on d5, and will have, I think, a decent game. Nothing wrong with this opening for White and for Black. Many top grandmasters are playing this open game. For instance, Daniil Dubov is a brilliant player when it comes to the Tarrasch Defense. So as I said, it's still playable in top grandmaster level. But now comes the critical moment. Here Black can choose to play the so-called Hennig Schara Gambit now with the move c takes d4, and this is now really wild, because there is now, in my opinion, there are only two good moves for White. White can play now the move queen to a4 or queen takes d4 immediately. So also what White could play, in my opinion it's a huge mistake, is the move of course d takes e6, and we're analyzing first the move d takes e6. D takes e6 in my opinion is now really a problem, because after bishop to e6 White has lost, I think, a little bit the activity. But what you should not do here from Black perspective, maybe White could prepare this trap for you, but you should not fall for this, because you could maybe take out the knight, but it's not good, because now comes e takes f7, deflecting the king from the defense of the queen, so you could lose the queen. In order to defend the queen you have to play now king to e7, but now comes the beautiful move. We have now the promotion of the knight, which comes now with the check. You have to take it now with bishop to g5. The game is over. It's sort of a reversed Lasker trap, if you're familiar with the Lasker trap. So now with the move bishop to g5 the game is over here for Black. So that's why you should not take out the knight. That could be here sort of a trap that White is preparing for you. But after move c takes d4, d takes e6, you should simply proceed with bishop to e6. You're taking out now the pawn, you have developed a piece, and you have also now the possibility to take out the knight. And there are now many ways here. Knight to b5 is a suicide, because queen to a5 happens. You can then also play something like bishop to b4, white could cover, and the game is simply over. So you see, this is, for instance, a game in FIDE master level. I see here, for instance, in this particular line in the database, a game between Preben Green against Thomas David. So both of them are around 2300 rated players. So it's really a sharp game in a decent level of chess, but you see even strong players fall for this trap. So let's see now a different continuation that white can make. So here we have again the Queen's Gambit declined, the Tarrasch Defense with the move c5 after c takes d5, which would be the main line, of course. Now again this move c takes d4, the from Hennig Schara Gambit. So here queen to a4, this is now the main line. In many times you see this particular continuation, many times black will play white will play simply this line. And now what should the black do here? Bishop to d7 is of course the main line, because we're getting a tempo, and whenever you have the opportunity to get a tempo against your opponent's pieces and you bring out a new piece into the game, you should do it. Because now with the move bishop to d7, okay, it's not maybe an optimal square for the bishop, but in the later stage the bishop can be maneuvered to c6 or wherever it's possible, knight to f6, knight to c6. So what we want to get as a compensation for the lost pawn is a piece activity. So we always counting how many pieces are out. If you can notice, black's bishop is already out. In the near future the knight will come out with the tempo. Also the knight on f6 will come very easily into the game. So in one particular moment you could maybe get a position where black is already 3 pieces out and white is only maybe 2, and white has started the game. Of course white is always playing the first move, so it's sort of a continuation that white doesn't want to get. Only 2 pieces out, black is already 3, so the piece activity is sort of a compensation that you can get out of any gambit. So that's why it's a sharp opening. As I said, the engine doesn't like, I have to again tell you this, the engine doesn't like this opening, but as a surprise element it could work. So after move bishop to d7, queen to d4, this is now the main idea. So we have now e takes d5 and now queen to d5 again. Now knight to c6 or even knight to f6 is a possibility. Whatever white does, I think the continuation is the same, because here what white could do again is as a mistake is now the move bishop to g5. And the move bishop to g5 is such a tempting move because it meets with basically any idea of a chess game: piece activity, development, creating chances, attacking chess, creating threats. Really it seems like a beautiful move, but you should always consider the weakness on b2 now as your main target. Whenever your opponent is living in a von Hennig Schara Gambit, the protection of the b2 pawn, white could have now really huge problems. What I'm recommending you here is normal development. Knight to f6, we're threatening now to take knight takes d5, and here for instance if black get challenged with the move bishop to f6, nothing wrong with this. Queen to f6 is still perfectly fine, and now with the move bishop to b4, queenside castling, I think black has really dominant game. So this is not a good position, I think, anymore for white. The queen is endangered. Again, I'm pointing out, we're counting how many pieces are out. The bishop is out, the knight is out, the queen is out. White has only 2 pieces and still the queen is endangered, so the queen will lose the tempo for sure in the near future. So meanwhile, queenside castling, maybe getting the rook on the d file, bishop to b4 are now really nice ideas. Meanwhile, the lack of development, knight to f3, e3, bishop to e2, you have to play still so many moves just in order to secure the king. So as I said, in my opinion here, black is better. So here for instance, knight to b5 can be a threat, but now with bishop to v4 nothing can happen. The game is over here for white. So that's why after move knight to f6, here white could proceed with the move queen to d2. It seems like a normal idea, keeping the tension here and also protecting the b2 pawn. But now the problem is now h6, and what should you do? For instance, if you take again we have, I think, a similar problem, queen to f6. And again, I think black has solved all of the positional problems, and the problem is now if you retreat to h4, and that's now a new mistake that white can make, you should simply proceed with the move g5. G5 is perfectly fine because it seems at the beginning you're weakening too much your pawn structure if you want to castle kingside, but actually you don't want to castle kingside in a von Hennig Schara Gambit. You want to castle queenside, because when you castle queenside, the rook gets on the d file where already the queen is. So that's why castling queenside, remember it, when you're playing the von Hennig Schara Gambit, queenside castling is so many times happening for black in such a beautiful way. So that's why even g5 here to kick away the bishop is perfectly fine. You're not weakening the pawn structure so much. You don't be scared to play this expansion moves on the king side. You can do whatever you like on the king side because you're castling queenside. Really wild stuff. So here after move bishop to g3, queen to a5. Now the pieces are getting into the game. Look at this, bishop to b4, queenside castling, knight to e4, then our opportunity. Really beautiful tactical possibilities. So now e3. This move has to be played in one particular moment. Maybe this wasn't the correct move now immediately. You don't have to play e3 immediately. You could play maybe a different idea. You can play knight to f3, but in one particular moment you have to play again e3 in order to develop your light square bishop. So again, the lack of development of white pieces are simply too much to handle. So here after move e3, queenside castling is now a really beautiful opportunity. And I'm seeing now, for instance, the game in the database here, Attila Jakab against Lukas Chernushek. Again, 2300 rated player against 2400 rated player, so maybe even international master level, and many tactical traps already happened. So here, for instance, bishop to c4 can be played to just develop the light square bishop, but now look at this, bishop to h3, perfectly fine, getting use of this d-file attack. As we said, queenside castling as a really nice tactical motif. We're castling queenside and we're still creating some threats. Really beautiful stuff. So in order maybe to prevent this, you could try bishop to d3 and try to develop maybe knight to e2, but still with knight to h5 I think the game is perfectly fine. Knight to f3, knight takes it here after king to g8, king to b8, bishop to b4 is still an opportunity. As I said, in my opinion, again, this beautiful setup causes now white many problems. So after move e3, as we said in this particular game, bishop to h3 was played, queen takes d8, knight to d8, and now even bishop to a3 was a possibility. Nothing can be done. The knight will be taken in this position. White resigns. So do you see many really beautiful traps already in an early stage of the game. White didn't react correctly. White tried to defend this position by playing this idea to play the piece on the best square. Even if you try something like queen to c2, look at this, bishop to f5 can happen, knight to b4. So you don't have so many good squares with the queen. Because of the move e3, the queen is a little bit stuck on this square. So as I said, the Hennig Schara Gambit is really wild because you get extra tempi against your opponent's queen. So let's see now, really in my opinion, what's a beautiful example here. Again, this von Hennig Schara Gambit, c takes d4, queen to a4, main line of course, bishop to d7, queen takes d4, and now again e takes d5. This is now this line that we're covering, knight to, queen to d5, now knight to c6, and again knight to f3. Knight to f3 is now a better move instead of this move bishop to g5 that we have seen is causing many positional problems around the square b2. The queen gets endangered. So as I said, with the move bishop to g5, white didn't gain anything. So that's why white is trying a normal development with knight to f3, then maybe to play the move e3, and again bishop to e2, and white is perfectly fine. Here after move knight to f6, we have queen to d1, and now bishop to c5. Really a nice move. And now again you could face this same idea, bishop to g5, and believe me or not, these are two grandmasters playing. So we have here with the white pieces Baron Tal against Timur Gareev. So this is really a beautiful level of chess that we're seeing now. And now with the move bishop to g5, the game is basically over already here for white. Really wild stuff. So when I'm as I said in the beginning, when your opponent is playing a bishop's move, always consider this attack around the square b2. That's now the huge problem. Here in the continuation we have queen to b6. You see, you have to cover yourself with the e3. You don't have basically better moves because your f2 pawn is hanging. So what you could do now is e3, but now again you lose, I think, the battle here simply around the square b2. Maybe bishop to f6 can happen, but now g takes f6, perfectly fine. You're messing up your pawn structure, but that's not the point. As we said, it doesn't matter because we don't have to castle kingside. We don't have to castle kingside because if we castle kingside, then of course this weakened pawn structure could cause you many positional problems around the king. But now when we castle queenside, or even in some occasions, I think you can even stay with the king in the center, this position is perfectly fine. Now you see here knight to e4 was played. Now bishop to b4. We have here knight d2, and now again bishop to g4. Look at this tension. This bishop is attacking here. The knight is pinning the knight. This knight is pinned by this bishop. Here in the continuation we have queen to c1, queen takes c1, rook to c1, and as we said, after bishop to f3 we have g takes f3, and now queenside castling wins the game here for black in this position. White resigned. Why did he resign? Because you can cover, of course, but the lack of development, the rook is far away from the action. You cannot protect yourself anymore. Rook takes d2, rook takes d2, and now with rook to d8, here you simply win the game. So as I said, be careful with what you're doing here with the white pieces, because if you're getting with your bishop too early out, as we said, like here bishop to g5, these moves are possible in my opinion, but at least you have to develop it somehow, your life with bishop, maybe with g3, bishop to g2. You have to have some kind of a compensation here in development, because you don't want to be really so far away from kingside castling or queenside castling here from white's perspective. So that's why an early bishop to g5 can be met with this beautiful tactical idea. It's queen to b6 and then around the square b2. So let's see now a different example. So here again we have the Tarrasch again here with the move c takes d4, the von Hennig Schara Gambit. After move queen to f4, again I'm repeating a little bit, but we really want to settle this main moves for a while now. So here after move queen to d4 we have e takes d5, queen to d5, again now knight to f6 or knight to c6, perfectly fine. Both of these moves are really good. And now queen to b3. Queen to b3 is sort of an idea that has to be met with the move knight to a6. You should really be familiar with this tactic, because the problem is now this is now really beautiful trap, and it's like in this London system or maybe in the neither Sicilian, this poison pawn. For instance, if your opponent takes now, here the pawn on b7, then you have a beautiful stunner knight to b4, and there's not a good way anymore to protect this c2 square in the near future. a6, rook to b8 could also be an opportunity. Bishop to c6 is working. So many beautiful attacking opportunities here for black. White has to resign this game immediately. So here after knight to b4, there is simply not a good way anymore to protect the c2. So the evaluation is +6 here, so it's game over for white. So after move knight to a6, the main goal of this move knight to a6, why is this move better than knight to c6? Because from this square we want to use the c5 square. For instance, if we play knight to a6, we have seen queen takes b7 is not working, but now okay, white continues the normal development, knight to f3, then maybe e3, bishop to e2, kingside castling, but at least we can get another tempo with the move knight to c5. And that's the beauty about this knight move on a6. It seems in the beginning like a strange idea, and I would not recommend you, of course, many times to play with your knight on the edge of the board, but we always evaluate the knight on the edge of the board. This knight will stay there forever on the edge of the board? This knight is perfectly fine on the edge of the board because it came into the game very easily with an extra tempo against the queen. Sometimes, of course, you should not play with the knight on the edge of the board, because the knight could be trapped there, it could stay there forever, but this is not the case. The knight comes now very easily into the game. So here after move knight to c5, we have queen to c2, and you see now this perfect setup that black is building. Rook gets on an active file, bishop on d6 will happen. So here after move e3, we have now sort of a mistake now that black can make, and in my opinion this is now the commonest mistake really that black is making in an early stage of the game. Here the perfect move is bishop to d6 and kingside castling. As I said, you cannot win the game here with the von Hennig Schara Gambit immediately if white plays the game correctly. Here white is still slightly better, but white made now a slightly passive move with the move e3, so the bishop cannot get developed on f4 g5 where it could be much better. But with the move e3, bishop to e2, you cannot really attack this position so easily. So it's not so easy now for black to defend to attack it immediately. Here black, in my opinion, rushed into the attack with the move queen to a5, and now with the move bishop to d2, you see actually black's queen got endangered. So black it seems to me that black has lost now an extra tempo here, because in the near future you have to escape with the queen anyway. So you should not rush into the attack when your opponent has played really solid chess. Here I think white has built a solid position with the move e3, will play bishop to e2, will kingside castling. Okay, this bishop is bad on d2, your activity is much better. but you're down a pawn. That's now the compensation. A little bit better piece activity, you lost a pawn, so it's, I think, a playable position then. But with the move queen to a5 here, black really rushed into the attack. Here knight to a4 was played. It was a gameplay between here Alessandro Mazzone against Jesper Lauritsen, and again sort of a feed and master level. But you see now how the game became really tactical. Knight to a4, we have rook takes c2, and here white did everything perfectly fine, even of course recaptured here the queen. But now with move bishop to a4, the problem is now that the rook got trapped with the move bishop to c3, and here black found some activities with the move bishop to a3, but this tactic is not working because rook to b1 of course protects first of all the b2 pawn, and now with the move knight to e4 here black probably thought, okay, I'm going to take now knight takes c3 and then rook takes c3 is perfectly fine. But now with the stunner here bishop to d3, this tactic is not working because after knight to c3 again black hoped for knight takes c3 and then knight take b1, but this is the problem. After move bishop to c2, okay, you can take out the rook, but now with bishop to a4 this comes with a check and you have to move the king and we can take out the bishop. Now white is continuing the game with the next rook piece, and that's exactly what happened in this position. White resigned. So really wild stuff. In my opinion, be careful if you're playing the von Hennig Schara Gambit. So as I said, here the rook to c1 is the rook to c8 is perfectly fine. You're getting the rook on the same file where already the queen is. But now after move, for instance, bishop to d6, then queen to bishop to e2, kingside castling, still I think black is here a good position. Okay, kingside castling can be played, and now maybe it would be time to maybe play queen to e7, rook to d8, and still with both of these rooks on this beautiful files, maybe we can try sort of an idea a6 b5 and similar stuff. Then also knight to e4 could be an opportunity, getting use of the c file attack. So rushing into the attack when your opponent has played a solid game. I think we can agree that in this particular scenario white played really a solid game with the move e3, didn't weaken the b2 pawn that we have attacked now many times. As you saw in our couple of examples before, we have attacked the b2 pawn very easily, but that was all possible when white left the defense of the b2 pawn. Now when white is playing solid chess, piece activity is the only thing that you gain out of the von Hennig Schara Gambit. So let's see now another example. So here again this idea, okay, c takes d4, queen to a4 now again, and now comes a different idea when white is taking out with the knight. So white doesn't want to get challenged with the knight on f6 move, but it's not a different thing, I think, because with the move knight to c6 again the queen gets endangered, and now it's very important to play this move knight to f6. Knight to f6 is very important because when we think about it harder, look at this. We have played once with our knight. We have played once with this knight. So we didn't break any principles of chess. We have played once with the bishop. So we have now already 3 pieces out. And even if your opponent takes now knight to f6, queen to f6, again, a piece gets out with an extra tempo. So you see now we have already 3 pieces out where white has none. And I think now that's the compensation that we want to get out of the von Hennig Schara Gambit. Now bishop to b4, queenside castling again is winning the game, I think, tactically for sure here for black. I would not love to play here the position from white's perspective. So that's why, in my opinion, here this knight on f6 is such a beautiful challenging move. And what can white do? White can retreat here to c3, and many games are played in this particular line. But again, I'm pointing out, look at this, the knight has played now knight to c3, knight to d5, and then knight to c3 3 times with the same piece. Meanwhile, black has brought 3 pieces out in the game and now can play also some beautiful moves with the bishop. So here in this particular game, it was a game played by Milos Jirovsky against Giuseppe Voltolini. Here bishop to c5, perfectly fine. We're playing normal development, knight to f3, queen to e7. As I said, we don't have to rush now immediately with the move queen to a5. Again, it's really like a beautiful tempting tactical idea. What we have seen with the move bishop to d2, the game gets more and more dangerous here for black. So here g3, and that's now sort of a mistake that I think white plays so many times, because as we said, the problem about the move g3 is that you don't want to play the move e3, and the move e3 would be really a solid game. As we said, bishop to e2 is happening, then kingside castling, but the move g3 it's sort of an idea to play bishop to g2. Okay, we're delaying a little bit the bishop. We don't want to expose ourselves with the bishop. We don't want to play bishop to g5. We don't want to play bishop to f4, because when we're playing with the bishop, then of course we have seen the b2 pawn is a weakness. But what we don't want to do is of course play e3, then we're blocking the bishop out. So what we're trying to do here from white perspective, we're trying to castle, and then we make sort of a decision. Maybe later we can play bishop to g5. But now with the move g3, the problem is now that the game is again really tactical against white's queen. Again, this motif, even queenside castling, I think is working here instead of rook to d8. But look at this, the queen is again more and more endangered. You could try bishop to d2, but now this is the stunner, knight to b4, and now the threat is of course even knight to d3 checkmate. For instance, if you try, let's see, this idea, knight to d3 is the beautiful checkmate here. You cannot take because of the queen activity on the e file. So really so many things can happen in this opening. So after move knight to b4, believe me or not, the game is almost like over here for white, because what white could do is now the move e3, and this is not a good position anymore, because you see bishop to c6 comes into the game. The problem, bishop to e2 gets a little bit deflected, that you cannot protect the f3, also the d3. All obviously white has so many light score problems now, so many holes in the position, and the problem is now you're playing the move e3, the move that you didn't want to play in the beginning. So now you're pretty much forced to play it, because we have seen knight to d3 was a huge position, tactical threat. So now a3, we have bishop to f3, we have bishop to b5, sort of a counterattack, king to f8, and now with knight to c2, white gets the fork. So the queen gets deflected from the defense of the c2 square, and now the game is over here for white. So here the continuation, king to d1, black took, knight takes a1, and even with bishop to c4, you cannot really take over here on b3. The knight can escape, because now you have a beautiful stunner. You have now b5, because if you try, for instance, something like bishop to a2 to keep your options, and you're not allowing maybe the knight here to get on b3, then with queen to d7 or queen to d6, the game is over here. The tension on the d file, the battery on the d file is simply too much to handle here for black. So these are really wild things, wild tactics in an early stage of the game. So you see how many things can happen. And this, let's go back, I think this g3 idea is something that you should be really familiar with, because many times white will try it out. It's a common idea, I think, when we're a little bit pressured here from white's perspective. As we said, we want to play kingside castling without playing the move e3 or without playing a bishop move, but it's not working because the activity, as we said, simply too much. Rook to d8, look how these pieces are getting so actively into the game, and now with knight to b4, it's game over. So really brilliant tactics. So let's see now another example. Really, you see how many possibilities are there in this very sharp opening. So here c takes d4, queen to d4, now knight to c6. Now we have a different line. Here white is playing a little bit around, so white is not playing this queen to a4 and then queen to d4 idea. White is playing queen to d4 immediately, but this gives again black here an extra tempo with the move knight to c6, and here queen to d1. Now we have e takes d5, and now after move queen to d5, bishop to d7. It's a similar position where knight to f6 will happen anyway. So again, sort of a loss of the tempo for the queens. Again, I'm pointing out bishop to g5 we have seen in these examples are not working. Knight to f6 will happen. Again, you have to move the queen. So here knight to f3, knight to f6, and now again this idea bishop to c5. Here it's a gameplay by Virginijus Grabieluskas against Johnny Hector. Johnny Hector here with the black pieces, queen to e7. Again, this setup. Again, we're not getting this queen to a5 idea. Now white played again a solid game, e3, bishop to e2 is happening, and then kingside castling. This is now white main goal. It's a common goal because normal development can be really a strategical idea or something. It's common sense in chess, so that's why e3, bishop to e2, or bishop to d2, maybe something like queen to c2, even queenside castling, but you have to be fast in development when it comes to white's position. So we have now the move a3. We have seen many times this knight to b4 idea as sort of a tactical shot that black is using many times. Knight to b4, then from this square this d3 and also the c2 pawn squares are controlled. So now with the move a3 it's sort of a prophylactic idea, and it's a loss of tempo again, because here queenside castling can be played, and now after move queen to c2, here we have this attacking opportunity with the move g5, and this is now sort of a move that is played many times in chess history, and many top players have fall for this ideas, because first of all, what we can notice about this move g5, what is this move doing? First, it's doing a very important thing, because kingside castling would be now very risky already, because we have now advanced pawn. In the near future we can expect also the g4 move attacking the knight. Queenside castling would be also very risky, because you have already weakened your pawn structure with the move a3. Now b3, a2 are really weaknesses. So rook to d8 is already played, so now there is even a tension on the d file. The problem is that you cannot take out this pawn. It's a tempting idea, but with the move knight to d4, you see again we're using this e-file attack, and now knight to d4 is working. You have to move the queen, and now with bishop to f5, look at this. It's game over again here for black. Really beautiful traps in the von Hennig Schara Gambit. If you try e4 to kick away the bishop, then a3, simply get out of here, and you have to move the knight somewhere, and the e4 is falling here again, the e-file attack, and it's simply game over. So really wild stuff. So after move queenside castling, we have queen to c2, g5. As I said, this is now the stunning move. What white should do here is of course normal development with bishop to e2. That's exactly what white did here. Normal development is always helping you out, but now you get the move g4, and with the move g4 now you have to play a knight move, and now king to b8. This is a good move, because we're getting out of the queenside attack. The queen is on c2, so we don't want to get attacked. If something gets cleared on the c file, then the queen could be very active. And now we have bishop to d2, and here white is announcing already that, okay, I've realized I will have problems if I castle kingside, because you have already advanced your attack on that side. I'm trying still this queenside castling idea, but here rook to c8, we have rook to d1. Here white is even trying to stay with the king in the center, but now comes again this idea knight to e5, and you see now the problem are, I think, again the light squares. Bishop to c6 can happen. Here the d3 is weak, c4 is weak, also the e4. These are clear targets when it comes to squares. In the near future we can also try some ideas like f5, f4, maybe opening the e-file, and still it's such a risky position to castle kingside, because as I said, I simply don't like this advanced pawn. So here after move knight to f5 was played, we have queen to e6, we have here knight to d4, and finally black got what black wanted to get is an open file, and that's exactly what happened. After bishop to d4 we have e takes d4. Now when the e file is open, then even we have such beautiful tactics like this, knight to f3, we have king to f1, and now a beautiful queen sacrifice, queen to f2, because here queen to e2. If you take of course king to e2, then here knight to d4, you get the fork. So whatever you do, it's game over. So here knight to d4, you can here bishop to f5, here black pardon me, white took, we have bishop to c2 attacking the rook, we have here a counter attack, and now after rook to d2 we have a rook to d8. Look, the king is really in danger. King to e5, now knight to d7, again a new possibility here. Bishop to b3, now knight to c5 is even a threat. So here after bishop to g5, knight to b6, really beautiful tactic. Again, if you take, of course we take, and then also the rook is saying here king to e2 was played, and now king to rook to g8 attacking the bishop, but now with the move knight to c4, the rook and the bishop get forked, the king got endangered. I really don't want it now to show you the whole game, but you see, let's go back to this critical moment of the game. So here after move knight to d4, here after move knight to d4, bishop to d4 is now the main goal, because the problem I think here for white was that White didn't know what to do. White didn't know where to fix the pieces, where to cement them, and the only square for the knight was the d4 square. But I don't think that trading pieces favors here white, although white is up a pawn in many occasions. Trading off pieces would be perfectly fine. Just to settle down and go into an endgame, but this is not working because still, even if two pieces are traded off, still black has two different pieces, and still the queen on the board, still two rooks on the board. So again, black has enough pieces to attack you. That's now the problem, I think, of white. So trading off one piece only will not help you for sure in the continuation of your game. So let's see now another example. Here it's a game played by Sergey Karjakin with the black pieces, again in this idea, here to take knight to c6, again with knight to f6. Again we had this idea a3, you'll see many times this move a3 to prevent some knight to b4 ideas, so don't get surprised. It's not maybe in the beginning it seems not like a strategically good move to weaken your pawn structure, but sometimes it's the only move to prevent this very annoying knight to b4 move. So queen to d1, again white is escaping here, bishop to c5, e3, queen to e7, knight to f3, and now again queenside castling. Again queen to c2. We have reached now a similar position. We have now here g5, again here by Sergey Karjakin, again this idea, again bishop to e2, and now g4, knight to d2, similar idea. I think this is slightly better here for white, because from this square white is controlling at least this b3, the c4 square, so it's at least a good defensive move. So king to b8, we have now b4, bishop to b6, and now knight to c4, trying to attack this very annoying bishop. Bishop to c7, and now bishop to b2, knight to e5, and now here white tried to queenside castling. It seems that white has solved now again all of the positional problems, but again I'm pointing out activity. Here Sergey Karjakin simply played bishop to c6. Look at this. This is weak. This is a weak pawn. This even is a weak pawn. So these three pawns are so weak in the continuation of the game. It's really hard to defend all of them here in the continuation. White tried bishop to knight takes e5, bishop to e5, rook takes d8. White desperately tried to simplify the game by trading off pieces, but here Sergey Karjakin said, okay, now it's enough. What is enough? Because we have traded now many pieces, now at least I'm continuing my here c file attack. So here we have bishop to d3, bishop takes g2, bishop to f5, rook to c6, king to b1, and now bishop to c6, bishop to f3, fixing the bishop here, rook to d2. Now here Sergey Karjakin takes another pawn. We have queen to b3, bishop to e5 in this position. White resigned. So here Karjakin's opponent was Andreas Modler. He was FIDE master level, so obviously Sergey Karjakin much stronger player, but he finished this game with simple ideas. Took some pawns, activated his pieces. The king had to get out of the range of the c-file. The queen had to get out of the range of the c-file. Again, white lost simply too many tempi. Meanwhile, black took the pawns and won the game very easily. So let's see now really a game in sort of, I would say, top grandmaster level. Now we have Anton Guijarro David against Jordan van Foreest. Really two respected grandmasters now these days, and here Jordan van Foreest, the Dutchman, played the von Hennig Schara Gambit. It's really wild how he played the game, again with the same ideas. Again, this queen to a4 idea, bishop to d7, queen takes d4, we have e takes d5, knight queen takes d5, knight f6, and here bishop to c5. Here, as we said, kingside castling, a little bit different mover, but now with queen to e7 and now rook to d8. Again, black is announcing this d-file attack. Again, really the most common attacking idea here for black. So queen to c2, knight to c6, and again a3. We have now reached a similar position. Now rook to c8, and you see now this attacking setup. Bishop perfectly fine on both diagonals, rooks on perfect files, bishop on perfect diagonals, knights on natural squares, so on f6 and c6, where they are controlling the center of the board. So all of the pieces of blacks are on optimal squares, and don't get mad or don't get surprised if you didn't gain anything out of the von Hennig Schara Gambit immediately. The only good thing, as I said, if your opponent plays the game correctly, is a good setup. So that's why don't get mad. Don't say to yourself, okay, I didn't won the game. I played a perfect gambit line. As I said, your opponent has opportunities to defend himself. Here white played again a beautiful setup, and now black has built at least some kind of an activity with the minor pieces, with the rooks and with the queen. So here kingside castling, bishop to d6, we have bishop to d2, knight to e5, rook to d1. Here white is competing of course on the d file, and here bishop to c7. When you are playing now the game from black's perspective, there is now one clear target that you have to keep in mind, and it's the weak c3. This is the game that you're centered around, because that's now the square that we're attacking. c3, c3, c3. You'll see now in the next video we'll have some games by Magnus Carlsen, also by the Stockfish engine, as I said. Again, the game will be in this top grandmaster level and the top engine level. The game will be centered now around the square c3. So when you don't know what to do, when you get maybe this position, remember always the game is now a battle around the square c3. As much as it may be surprising you, but I guarantee you around the c3 square with bishop to a5 and similar stuff, you get the most out of it, because now the knight is a little bit loose on the board. So here bishop to c1, we have h5, knight to d4, knight to c6, knight takes d4, rook to d4, queen to e5. Here of course an attack, checkmate threats, you have to cover that with f4 or g3. We have now queen to e7, bishop to c6, and now bishop to b6, rook to b4. We have bishop to c6, and now bishop to c6. And it seems so that white has defended the position again very well, because many pieces are traded off. The game gets more and more simplified, which is perfectly fine for white. But many times in the beginning, after move e3, the bishop on c1 or on d2, it becomes a bad bishop, and sometimes also the strategy can be to play sort of a bad bishop strategy. What I mean about that, you could maybe try to give somehow the bishop for a knight, then after something like b takes c3, you could cement your knight maybe on e4. Maybe if this knight would be supported by a pawn, then a centralized knight on e4 on a light square, where the knight cannot be attacked by any minor pieces anymore, could be really also a strategical idea. As I said, the game should be simply somewhere around the square c3, maybe not directly, but indirectly some things could happen around that square. So here king to h1 was played, now bishop to a5, we have rook to a4, and as I said, bishop to c3. Now b takes c3, and now b5, kicking away the rook, rook to b4, queen to c5, and now here black, pardon me, white made a huge blunder, didn't get out of the range with the rook. So of course here Jordan van Foreest simply took queen takes b4, and the game was over. But even if that wouldn't happen, here I think, as I said, in some occasions we should try rook to e8, and then if the knight gets cemented on e4, this could be such a powerful knight. This would be the so-called octopus knight, and I would always love to play this position from black's perspective more. So here let's see now another example. We could have a position where after move c5 and c takes d5, c takes d4, we have now again this idea with queen to d4. So here white doesn't play this queen to a4, queen to d4 idea. Now knight to c6, again we get this extra tempo. We have queen to d1, and now e takes d5. Now we have again this move queen to d5, and now you could maybe try sort of an idea with the move queen to bishop to e6. But this game, in my opinion, leads into a game where if white knows what white is doing, then white could have really comfortable game, because here queen to d8, rook to d8. Okay, when it comes to piece activity, again black has a decent game, because black has 3 pieces out, white is only 1, but of course white is an extra pawn. So here e4 could be an idea. We have knight to b4, bishop to b5, and now king to e7. And this is a line that you get many times. Now king to f1 is really the main line, because knight to c2 was now the main threat. But now after move g6, here bishop to g5, f6, bishop to f4, here g5, and now with the move bishop to c1, it seems so that everything is perfectly fine for white. But there is now a line, I think, here from king to f7 with knight to f3. The problem is now you can maybe try this one, and this is now the critical tactic that is happening many times all of this particular sequence of moves. And I see many games in the database in similar positions, maybe not in the same, but now comes the common tactical motif of this opening line. So after move knight to c2, your opponent is forced to play king rook to b1, and now you could try this idea, bishop to a2. But the problem is now white could now make a huge mistake with the move knight to knight to a2, because here rook to d1 can happen, and the problem is now the rook is simply lost. Here you could try bishop to c4, king to g7, and now after move e5, here black can cement the position and has now, of course, a situation where black is up the exchange. But the problem is now after move, let's go back, bishop to a2, black played really a wild tactic, deflected the knight from the square d1, but white can proceed here with a tricky move, knight to g5. And believe me or not, this position will happen to you many times if you're playing this bishop to e6 in the beginning. So here, for instance, if you play f takes g5, then of course here bishop to g5 comes out with a tempo, and suddenly you see the rook is hanging, and in the near future the rooks will be connected, so you will not be able to play this idea rook to d1. It's now huge problem, so that's why this is not the way to play it. So after move bishop to a2, knight to g5 can happen. So that's why, in my opinion, we should not study this line anymore, because it's sort of a line in which white can play a really decent game. White can defend this position very easily and has really good counterplay ideas. So let's see now another example, and this will be now our last example. Again, this idea, c takes d4, knight to c6, and now what white could do instead of this move queen to d5 is again to take with the knight. And again, as I said, knight to f6, knight to f6, we're challenging the knight in the central board. Again, if white wants to take, then we get with their queen out. If white wants to retreat, then again white has lost an extra tempo. White has played 3 times with the same piece in the opening, which is of course a break of basic principles in chess. So here knight to f6, queen to f6, and now after move knight to f3, bishop to b4, we have knight to d2. Bishop to d2 is not possible, because you get simply queen takes b2, and now if you take knight to b4, queen to b4, here queen to d2, you can simply develop bishop to e6, you don't have to react. And now with knight to b4, again rook to d8 will happen, and here black is obviously much better. So after move bishop to b4, you have to cover here with the move knight to d2, and from this point on, believe me or not, it's almost like a game that is simply lost for white immediately. So here bishop to g4, or even bishop to f5 is here opportunity. Bishop to f5 with ideas after e3, kingside castling, for instance, bishop to e2, now rook to d8, look at this ideas, again castling, and now bishop to d2, look at this, queen to b2. So again, the battle is lost around the square b2. The bishop is endangered here on the d file. The pressure is here on the d file. You cannot move the bishop, you lose the queen. So you see, many really wild things can already happen out of this opening. So you could try bishop to f5, perfectly fine. Also bishop to g4, here h3, and now bishop to a5. And what white will probably many times do is maybe sort of an idea bishop to f3. But now with bishop to e6, e3, you see queen to e5. Even if you try something like, I don't know, e4, here to maybe cement the position or on light course, again it's not so good. You get again this queenside castling idea. Look at this activity, bishop to e2, now queen to d4, and again the game is simply lost on the d file. So really tricky stuff. Always this queenside castling or this rook to d8 idea. The d file attack is something that bothers, I think, always here white in the continuation of the game. e3, queen to e4. Here I see a game between Chingiz Aliyev against Dimitrios Vasilis. Here black played, I think, really great game after queenside castling, and again the queen had to escape. Bishop to f5, we have knight to e4, here bishop to g6. Here it's of course a possibility, takes, and now the game was simplified to one particular moment where we can agree, I think, that black is much better. Okay, black is here 6 pawns, so white has 6 pawns, black is only 5 pawns, but the activity of this bishop is really weird. It cannot be improved. It's blocked out by its own pawn. This bishop is maybe having so far a good activity, but it, I think, cannot be developed really in a good way. You have to also protect your g4 square from this square. The knight is very, very dangerous. The activity on the d file is again really beautiful here for black. So again, the activity that you gain out of this opening is simply too much to handle here for white. So here rook to d1, pinning everything, basically. b4, we have bishop to b6, we have king to e2, and now of course this other rook comes into the game. So look at this, how easy now the game is here for black. Here in the continuation we have g3, again trying to develop the bishop in a different way, but now king to b8, getting out of the potential check, of course, and then the rook could be hanging, so king to b8, perfectly fine. Bishop to g2, now rook to d3, we have rook to e1, and now rook to c3. Here we have rook to c2. Now you have to cover with the bishop, and now with the move knight to c4, the bishop is hanging, so that's why you have to protect. Rook to a2, we have king to e1, and now bishop to e3. Really, really beautiful move. We have bishop to e3, knight to e3. Rook to d8 is not working because you get an intermediate attack against the rook, and then you lose the bishop. So here you have to play rook to d2, but now knight takes g2 comes with check here, and here you have to move rook to a3. It's obviously a winning game here for black, because black has grabbed an extra piece and has now also this 2 versus 1 situation. So we'll create a pass pawn and will win the game for sure. So really, really beautiful ideas. So this video is about the common mistakes, I think, that white is making in the continuation of the von Hennig Schara Gambit. We're analyzing now really how white is playing the game in a good way, and also some good defensive ideas for black. So in my opinion, it's an opening that you should try to avoid if you're maybe a beginner, but if you're maybe an intermediate player and maybe a stronger player, you can try it out as a surprise element. You see how many tactical traps are possible, how many mistakes white can make, so maybe you can try it out and have some fun. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed this tactical examples, really wild stuff that can happen. And if you like this content, check out my other Queen's Gambit series videos with some other possibilities, with some other openings and sidelines of openings. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.